Aloha everyone, this is Chesapeake Movie Thoughts, and today we're talking X-Men. This week I went out to see Dark Phoenix. I guess it's just called Dark Phoenix, not X-Men Dark Phoenix. Um, but it is most likely the last of the X-Men series that has been going on since the early 2000s. The last of that series, that is probably not the last time we'll see X-Men on the big screen, but because of the Disney-Fox merger, probably the next time we see X-Men, it will be tied into the MCU in some way, which is a good thing. But I have enjoyed the X-Men series so far, and what did I think about Dark Phoenix? It's okay. Um, it's not great. It's not horrible. It's okay. It's kind of a mixed bag. That's why I say that. There were some things in the movie that I rather enjoyed. There were other things that were kind of head scratching, kind of pulled me out of the movie. So you put those together, and the movie was okay. And to explain exactly why I feel that way about the movie, I think I am going to have to go into some spoilers for this. So just be warned from this point on. If the this is a spoiler-free part. It's about to end of the video, so we're going to be going into spoilers as I talk about the movie here, because I want to go over some of the good points and some of the bad points. Some of the good points are the film opens up with a flashback to Jean Grey. Of course, Jean Grey is the one who's going to become the Phoenix. So it's a flashback to Jean Grey when her powers first manifested, and we see that she's in a car, going for a drive with her parents, and when her powers manifest, or telekinesis manifests, it causes a big car wreck, in which her parents apparently die, and we learn that Xavier takes her in and basically adopts her. From that point on, she's 8 years old. Now, this is a retcon, as previously we've seen the relationship between Xavier and Jean Grey be kind of that of a mentor-student. They're close, but kind of a mentor-student way. This one establishes that, well, there was really a lot more to it than we saw. He's basically her father. He's raised her since she was 8, so Xavier is basically her father. And from that, retcons are kind of inconsistent, but this franchise has done this sort of thing before. We find out in X-Men First Class that Mystique, even though they acted like they barely knew each other in the previous X-Men movies, has actually been Xavier's foster sister. That when he was a child, I guess he convinced his parents to take her in, and they basically were raised as like brother and sister. So that was a retcon, but it also did lead to some really good character interaction, really good character dynamics between the two, which does come back in this movie as well. So sometimes these little retcons are okay if you get some good juicy story out of it. And I think that that the retcon making Xavier more of a father to Jean Grey than we ever knew before, I think that also gave us a lot more story. It really nails that. It sells that connection between the two a lot better here. I'm like, oh well, I kind of get where Xavier's coming from a lot more, knowing that this is basically his daughter. Basically, he is a foster daughter, whatever you want to call it. Basically, he raised her. So I understand Xavier a little better, I think, because of that. So we get a lot of good character dynamics between Jean Grey and Xavier, and that was the story thread running throughout this that I was most interested in. What was, if anything, really what kept me in the movie, it was that seeing what happened to Jean and what her how it was affecting her relationship with Xavier. So that was good. Action was good for the most part. The best action scene was a scene on a train, which okay, it's the best action scene, but it's also the worst shot action scene because it goes into a lot of shaky cam stuff, and it's really hard to tell what's going on. Conceptually, it's the best action scene, but yeah, other than that, the action scenes are pretty good. Although it's not really too action heavy. Um, I did really like that. By the time this movie takes place, the X-Men are basically this universe's Avengers. They're a superhero team. The world looks at them as superheroes. There's toys of them. The probably trading cards, whatever. The kids love them. The president has a hotline in the Oval Office that connects him directly to a phone on Xavier's desk. So they're basically looked upon as superheroes. So human mutant relations have gotten a lot better in this movie, and that in the X-Men stories that I've seen so far, between when I used to read the comics and the animated series and so on, it's like it always seems to start out where the mutants are all just distrusted, just generally speaking, and then eventually relations get better, where people kind of realize eventually that, oh well, there's good mutants and there's bad mutants, and the X-Men are good mutants, and there's always there's like mutant anti-mutant hate groups. That's so that prejudice still exists, but it's not as widespread. There's always the anti-mutant hate groups, and there's always the threat that that the anti-mutant hate groups their ideas will spread. That some evil mutant will do something that will start to convince people that maybe these anti-mutant hate groups are correct. And so that is where we are with this X-Men movie. And I like that when you get to that part of the X-Men, because at least that allows you still get to deal with your issues of prejudice, as X-Men always needs to do. That's kind of their reason for being. But it also allows the X-Men to be superheroes, and operate as superheroes, and I like that. I like them being the Avengers of their universe. Um, so that's where we are. And then in this movie, there is also mention that we're one bad day away from all this goodwill going away. We're one bad day away from that, and that's kind of what I was talking about. That thing hanging over the X-Men's head, where like if things go really badly with like one bad mutant, then like that could set back everything that they've worked for, and that's something we see start to happen here in this movie. Um, it does. I mean, Jean Grey. The whole point of the Dark Phoenix saga is that Jean Grey gets bonded with a cosmic being from space, who like amplifies her emotions, amplifies her powers, to the point where she can't control either one, and so she basically becomes evil. It's kind of left ambiguous as to how much of this is Jean and how much of it is the Phoenix, the cosmic being, because she's pretty much a composite, really, of the two beings. At this point, the cosmic being has merged its consciousness with Jean's, and so it's at this point you have to wonder: is this really Jean? Is this her losing control, or is it the Phoenix? And that's implied in this movie. It doesn't get explored too much. I wish it had been explored more as to how much of this is Jean's fault, and how much is it the influence of the Phoenix, and how much is the Phoenix to blame? Because they don't go into this in this movie, but as I understand it from the comics, Phoenix is this cosmic entity that doesn't really understand human emotions, and when it bonds with Jean, it experiences her emotions and her negative impulses, and it amplifies them, it's never experienced these before, and it doesn't have the self-control that Jean has, having been raised a human with these emotions, and it just kind of goes crazy. So it's it's a lot more interesting, I think, in the comics actually than they left a lot of the good parts out. And I guess I'm transitioning into the negatives here. So let's talk about some of the negatives in the film. Um, the film, while it doesn't explore how much of this is really Jean's fault, it does explore how much of it is Xavier's fault, and basically the film's saying it's all his fault. Uh, Xavier, we find out that, well, apparently Jean's mother died in that accident we see. The father survived, but the father after that didn't want to have anything to do with Jean anymore. He was afraid of her. He didn't want to deal with her anymore, and Xavier offered to take her in. And what he did was he used his telepathy to put blocks in her mind that would prevent her from sensing her father's existence. So she would prevent her from finding out the truth that her father actually survived and just didn't want her anymore. And basically, the movie says that everything that happens is because of that. Is because Xavier did that. It's saying that Xavier doing that caused her, once her powers were amplified and she broke through those barriers and was able to sense her father again, and she sought him out and she found out the truth that he just didn't want her anymore, that he couldn't handle her. Then she goes nuts from that point and loses control. So the movie says that, well, it's because Xavier kept this truth from her that all of this happened, and like everybody points their fingers at him. And eventually, by the end of the movie, he says, "Yes, it is all my fault." I mean, he gets forgiven, and Jean does eventually acknowledge that, yeah, what you did out of love. But the film is so sure that it's his fault, and I'm not. When I look at what he's did, I'm not going to say necessarily that what he did was right. I'm also not prepared to say that what he did was wrong. It's one of those situations where the right thing to do is very hard to see, especially if you're not the one in that situation. If you had the power to shield your daughter from a very painful truth, especially when she's like 8 years old, you shield her from a very painful truth that there really isn't anything she can do to change anyway. Is it right to spare her the pain? Or is it wrong to keep the truth from her? Is it more right to shield her from the pain, or is it more wrong to shield her from the truth? And the movie doesn't really address that. It just comes clearly down on, oh, it's wrong. It's wrong. He shouldn't have kept that from her. And what he did, and everything he did was his fault. It's just as bad as being the person who actually caused death and destruction when the Phoenix got unleashed. And I can't go with the movie on this. Most of the movie, I'm like, I don't know. I'm on Xavier's side. There's a scene early on where, after the there's a mission to space, which is where the Phoenix gets bonded with Jean, in which there's a space shuttle accident, and they send the X-Men into space to rescue the astronauts because now they're superheroes in this world. And then they come back. Mystique begins laying into Xavier, criticizing him, saying that, yeah, hey, a lot of our people risked their lives there. They could have gotten killed, and you don't care. And I'm like, well, of course he cares. And he says, like, well, tell me this isn't your ego. This isn't because you enjoy being hobnobbing with government high up, political high ups, and the crowd. And it's like, well, as opposed to being hunted down with the like registration act or whatever. Yeah, it is better than that. And by having our people risk their lives to save other people, even ordinary humans as opposed to mutants, having our people do that is the kind of gesture of goodwill that's created this situation where mutants are now, for the most part, accepted in society. And I'm like, he's right. And the movie keeps trying to lead me to say that he's wrong, and I'm like, I'm with Xavier on this. I mean, they're being superheroes. That's their job. It's like if they were firefighters, then you're criticizing the fire chief for sending firefighters and risking their lives to fight fires. the movie wanted me to blame Xavier, and I just couldn't go with him there. I can't say exactly that he didn't make a mistake, but the mistake he would have made would have been consistent with his character, because hiding a painful truth from a loved one is exactly the same thing he did to Moira McTaggart in previous movies. And while those previous movies said that he was wrong for doing it, they didn't say that it was an unforgivable, not at all understandable mistake. It treated it like it was the difficult call that it was, and said that, you know, it was probably wrong, but it didn't really condemn him for it. So I just can't go with this movie on its blaming of Xavier. Another thing, talking about character consistency, Xavier's consistent. Other characters are very inconsistent with their previous depictions. Because, okay, there has been some hints before of a relationship maybe between, or some feelings at least, between Beast and Mystique. Well, apparently they had some kind of relationship here, because the Mystique gets killed when the Phoenix, Jean Grey begins to lash out as the Phoenix. And so Mystique gets killed. Not surprising, because it's been well known that the actress that plays Mystique has been trying to get herself out of this franchise for the last couple of movies. It's the last one anyway, but they didn't know it when they were filming it. But, so Mystique dies, and Beast is really upset. He begins blaming Xavier for it in the same way I was talking about before, like the whole movie's blaming Xavier for it. And not only that, he leaves the mansion, Beast, leaves the mansion, teams up with Magneto to go on a revenge mission to kill Jean. Beast, highly intelligent, level-headed, practical Beast, is going off half-crazed on a revenge mission. What? That is completely inconsistent with his character. Another weird inconsistency is that Nightcrawler, happy-go-lucky Nightcrawler, in the middle of the battle on the train, when the guards that had at first arrested them, and then when they find out they're now fighting aliens, they release the X-Men, and they're fighting alongside the X-Men with against the aliens. One of the guards gets killed by an alien. This is, bad. This is not something that he should feel good about, but Nightcrawler sees that, and he loses it. And he goes off on this, it's like a berserker rage, and he becomes really brutal, beating down these aliens in, the most brutal way. He teleports one to the front of the train tracks, leaves him on the train tracks, teleports away, and the train smacks right into him. Brutal. And I'm like, this is Nightcrawler? Jeez. I mean, this leads me to believe that, this is the first Wolverine-less X-Men movie. This is the first one that has not had Wolverine in it at all. Although in First Class it was just a cameo. But this is the first one that has not had any Wolverine in it at all. But it just shows me that these writers can't really write an X-Men movie without Wolverine, with maybe First Class being an exception. But they had to take Wolverine's traits and give them to other characters that they don't fit with. They had to give berserker rages to Nightcrawler, and they had to give, the revenge motivation to Beast. And it makes absolutely no sense in this movie. So those inconsistencies and just the way they treated Xavier in this, it kind of pulls me out of the movie, and it just kept it from being a really good film, and that's why it's just okay. Like I said, there was part of the story I was really engrossed in. I really wanted to see what happened to Jean, but I kept getting pulled out of the movie by, no, Beast wouldn't do that. That's Nightcrawler. Nightcrawler doesn't behave like that. And, you want me to blame Xavier? I can't. Xavier, he may have made a mistake, but this isn't all his fault. So, that's basically it. So take that for what you will. The movie is a mixed bag. Some inconsistencies, some good stuff too. Worth seeing. I hear it's not getting good reviews. I hear it's not making a lot of money, so you may end up not seeing it. If you haven't seen it already, you may end up not seeing it until it's on video. Which that'll be okay. But I am glad I saw it. I am glad I saw it. It's some good stuff. But yeah, just a weird entry into the series. Anyway, like, comment, subscribe, and that's a wrap.